Oh, hello, all my loved ones. Last night, Chi-Chi asked me if I would tell her how I met Mawaw. So maybe you would like to hear how I met him too. So, I'll tell you. My girlfriend and I were sitting in front of our home, my home, many years ago, and it was the custom those days to sit out in front of your home. So we were sitting on the doorstep, she and I will have to say this about my girlfriend. She was very pretty, and I would say she was very flirtatious, more than I was. And about 4 or 5 boys were passing, and she coughed. And of course they all turned around, and they all came over and sat down on the doorstep by us. So we sat there for a while, and I decided that I was going to get up and walk away, seeing as how I didn't know the boys. So when I walked away, Mawaw followed me, and of course we spoke for a few minutes, and then he asked if he couldn't see me again, and of course I said yes. So that's how I met him, which was a lucky day in my life, I think. He made a very good husband and father, and we have now 55 grandchildren to attest to that fact. It was a happy marriage. So I tell him the phone.
Go ahead and get it, yeah.
So anyhow,
you want to answer it? You want me to turn it off and answer
I
it?
better.
Okay, go ahead.
So keep on ringing.
Mm-hmm.
Hello? Yeah, this is your mother. Well, I'm just fine. How are you? Yes, we went out and we just got in. And Joe is taping a speech I'm making. I'm telling how I met Mawaw, or your father. Yeah. So, everybody is just fine. Well, not too late, about 11. Listen, how about tomorrow? We gotta get this over a little bit fast. What time do you think you can be out? By 11? Uh-huh. Because Joe has a dinner appointment for 5 o'clock, and we'd like him to come with us. So the earlier you get here, the better we like it. Yeah, okay. Yeah, well, you should try and see about them 11. Okay, honey. You can call me again if you want. Okay, goodbye, dear. Goodbye. Bye. Now, there isn't much more to say about meeting him. What
year was it?
On about him?
Sure, but what year did you meet him?
Huh?
What year was it that you met Mawaw?
You know, Joe, I don't remember about years. I'll just say how old I thought I was.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I'll just do the best I can. Turn it on.
Okay.
Is it on?
Yeah.
Well, after going with Dad for a few years, I was only about 16 or 17, and but anyhow, I only knew him from September until Christmas, when he gave me a diamond ring. And of course, this is rather personal, but I'm writing about my personal life, I think. He gave me a diamond ring for Christmas, and I didn't even do anything more than thank him for it. I didn't even give him a kiss. So anyhow, we didn't believe in kissing those days. As he told me afterwards, he said, one of the main reasons I kept coming back to see you was that I always wanted to see if I could get a kiss. So in that way, I got him to come back to see me all the time. Well, anyhow, it finally ended up where he went to war, and we had had a little spat in the meantime, and had broken up. So I called up I wondered why he hadn't called me, even though we had separated. I called up where he worked, and they said he had joined the Army. Well, I felt so bad because I knew his people were all in Mississippi and that he had no one in Chicago. So of course I wrote right away. He was in France. And I got a book back in response to my letter. So that was almost the beginning of our romance again. Then when he came back after 2 years in France, we got married. And that's the tale of my romance with Rapaw, who, by the way, got the name of Rapaw from Billy, who couldn't say Grandpa. So he was called ever since by the name of Rapaw. And he gave me my name too, Mawaw. Which during the years we liked the names. And I think that name is going to continue, seeing as how Mariana has it now. I wouldn't say that Bill has it. He has a pretty name by the name of Grunk. And he likes that too. So that's the story of my romance with Daddy. Although I had a few more in between.
A few more romances?
It would take me all day to tell. So I think that's enough about my romances.
What about what you say you had a few in between?
Can't hear you.
You had a few in between? You had a few in between. I want to turn this light off behind you. It might be better light on your face. You had a few romances in between?
Oh yeah.
Really?
Well, while I was going with Dad, I met another fellow, and I met him in September also on vacation, and Christmas time, I also got a beautiful lavalier with a big diamond set in onyx for a Christmas gift. 5-pound box of candy and a few other things. He even bought gifts for Lorraine. And I must say again, in truth, that he never even got a kiss too. We didn't believe in kissing those days. I believed if I kissed anyone, I committed a mortal sin. So anyhow, instead of getting kisses, I got jewelry. And which I appreciated very much. So I got jewelry from him, and well, I won't tell you all I got. Only that I will tell you one day, it was my birthday, what he sent me, which I think was a little unusual. The first thing in the morning, I got a beautiful card. Then I got a 5-pound box of candy. Then I got 3 dozen beautiful tea roses in the afternoon. And when he came at night, I got 4 $2.50 gold pieces in a beautiful box. And I must confess, he didn't get a kiss either.
Did he try to get a kiss from you?
Well, I wouldn't say he didn't try. he tried, but he really had no success. But I will say one, in the 2 years I went with him. One night, we were saying goodbye. He was out in the hall, I was in my dining room, right across the threshold. And I don't know why, but I let him kiss me, and he was so surprised that they used to wear derbies in those days. He took off his derby like this, and he thanked me. So that was the one kiss I got from him.
Now, did you get all these presents from Rappaw?
What?
These presents you just talked about for your birthday, were they from Rappaw? Or was
My
this from
birthdays with Grandpa?
No, when you just talked about receiving the flowers and the candy and the coins, was that from
I was going to Grandpa at the time. I knew him.
Right.
But, well,
this was from another
Grandpa
fellow?
had asked me to marry him already,
Huh.
but I didn't say yes. So, anyhow, what happened after that? Well, I never would, as I said before, kiss someone I would say cold. I don't know whether this is too personal or not.
No, not at all.
So, what was I going to say about, oh, we were going to split up after a couple of years, and I got a letter from him.
Now this is from Rappaw?
This here fellow that I got all the gifts from. And in it he said, I cried myself to sleep last night, and so help me God, I'll never do it again. So that was the last I heard from him. Because he knew I went with Tony, and he knew that I wasn't too crazy about him. Maybe I would have kissed him. But anyhow, I never heard from him again. So, anyhow, that's how we split up. And Dad was sure glad to hear from me. So when he came back from the war, I was in the hospital. I had a slight operation of some kind. And Annie, of course, used to run things then as she always did. She came over to the hospital one day. I was recuperating, and I was pretty well then. But there was no talk of me going home, and she came and she said, well, let's go home. And she had Tony with her. He had his uniform on and everything. And she said, Tony's here, you carry out to the car. I said, the doctor didn't say I couldn't leave. She said, oh, you can leave, you're better. And of course things are more lax in those days. So I got dressed and Dad carried me out to the car and carried me up 3 flights of stairs. And, well, anyhow, of course, after that, then I got better. And we used to go out promenading up and down the boulevard with his uniform on. And I was so proud of him. So,
were you really in love with him?
yeah?
Did you love him a lot then? Were you really in love with Rappaw then?
Oh, yeah, yeah. He was so faithful and so true, and so he stood for so much from me, you know. And nothing ever dampened his spirits, because when the first time I met him almost, he wanted to ask me to marry him. So anyhow, boy, I never regretted that day. I got a very good husband in Rappaw. And I think you all know Rappaw very well. You know what a good grandfather he was.
Very special man.
So anyhow, I don't forget him. I pray for him and have masses said for him continually. So I hope to meet him someday. And in the near future too. It won't be long now. And I'm ready to go to meet him anytime. I'm all set, all packed already. So, oh, I think that's enough about Grandpa and I.
Let me put this light on over here. I want to get some different feels with light. Oh, this one doesn't work, huh? No, that's okay. So,
It's turned off now.
this?
Is it turned off?
Oh no, it's going.
Is it still on?
Oh yeah.
Oh. Well, shall I tell about Mary now?
Yeah, why don't you tell that story?
Okay. Well, I was married for a few years, and I had Mariana and another little baby girl called Constance Coletta. And on one Sunday, Francis' husband's family and my family, we all decided to go to a picnic at Riverview Park in Chicago. And anyhow, the first stop on the way to the park was at Lincoln Park. And we all got out of the cars and we sat on the grass for a while. And a man came up to my sister Mary. And he asked her if she wanted a drink of water, which she did. So we all commented about it afterwards and thought that that man must have seen something in her that we didn't see, because it wasn't very long after that that she was dead. And anyhow, we all lived together. Mary Ann and her husband, Pete, they had been married only a couple of years. And we were all very happy. And, well, then we left the park and went to Riverview. And going in the entrance, I had the baby. And there was a man, a beggar, I guess you call him, at the entrance, and Mary put something in his little tin cup, and I said, Mary, put something in for me, and she said, now you owe me 12.5 cents. So I suppose she could have quartered it. So anyhow, then we went into the park and we sort of all separated. Some got on rides and some were sitting down. There were maybe 10 or 12 of us there. My brother Timmy was with us. And Annie wasn't there. She and my mother had left for northern Michigan early that morning, way up in the woods, so they weren't with us. So Dad and I and Mariana got on what I thought was a merry-go-round. So he put Mariana on one horse, and I was on another, and he stood between the two of us, and he held on to Mariana. She was only couple of years old. So anyhow, the horses started to race, and I didn't have much strength. The baby was about 14 months old. I don't think I had all my strength back. And I thought it was a merry-go-round, and when the horses started to race, I couldn't hold on to the horse. And I said to Daddy, I said, I can't hold on. I'm going to fall. And he said, well, I can't leave go of Mariana. If I do, she'll fall. So he said to the man that was running the merry-go-round, whatever it was, stop the thing. My wife can't hold on to this horse. And he wouldn't do it. He said, I can't stop it. And the two of them were quarreling. Daddy was swearing at him. And my sister Mary was standing watching the thing go round. And I was crying and carrying on. And she was saying, like, behave yourself, you know, like that. So anyhow, the thing came to a halt, and we got off. Well, I went back to sit on a bench, and I don't know where Dad was. Oh, I went to get the baby. George Peterson's mother had her, and I got the baby from her, and then she went on her way. She went around the park. And I was sitting there with the baby when I saw Mary's husband coming down the pathway, and his shoulders were heaving, and he was crying. And I said, "Pete, what's the matter?" He said, "Mary's dead." Well, of course I couldn't believe it. I had just a few minutes before she was waving to me as I went around. So anyhow, the baby and I and he went back to this little room where she died. It was like, well, where people went to get help there, you know, when they hurt themselves. A little bit of a place. And I met Tim at the door, and he said, "Mary's dead." And I said, "No, she can't be dead." He said, "Well, she's dead all right." So I went in, and sure enough, Mary was laying there. She must have died almost instantly, and she hadn't been sick that we had known her. She hadn't been to a doctor or anything. So, well, I didn't know what to do. Nobody knew what to do. So the first thing I thought of, we have to get a priest to Tony. So or was it before? I guess it was before that, when Frances heard she was dead. She and I were outside this little room, and I had the baby in my arms, and she was hollering, "Water! Water!" She and Mary were very close. So anyhow, there was no cup, no nothing. We went over there with a little fountain, and I was slapping water up into her face, and she stopped and she said, "Oh, let's kneel down and pray." So with everybody in Riverview Park, we knelt down in the cinders, and the two of us were praying, me with the baby in my arms and her carrying on trying to pray. So then when we get up, I didn't know where anybody was, only Daddy was around. So I said, "Well, let's get in the car. We've got to get a priest." I thought, well, nobody could die without the last rites of the church. So we went all around the north side. We finally got a priest, but it took us an awfully long time. And when we got back, they said, Mary has been taken away to Ravenswood Hospital. So we hurried up with a priest to Ravenswood Hospital, and they said she was pronounced dead. She wasn't even brought in. So, well, there was nothing for us to do but go home, and we stopped at the church, Street some church there, 55th on the boulevard. And I told him what happened, and he said, "Where is she?" And I said, "I don't know where they've taken her." But I said, "What am I going to do?" And he said, "Well, maybe she's better off than you or I. And don't worry too much about it." So when we got home, of course, she was in the undertaking room there around 63rd near Ashland. So then we had to get my mother and Annie, who were way up in Michigan. We didn't know much about getting her, you know. So we tried, and it took us hours before we got her because it was at night. It was around midnight before we got her. And when she got to the phone, I told her, of course, what happened and that Mary was dead. And I said, I don't know how you're going to get Mom home. She said, well, I don't either. If I tell her Mary's dead, I won't be able to get her home. So she told my mother that Mary was sick and we had to leave. So they left as soon as the next day, I guess. It was midnight then. So to make a long story short, when my mother's train arrived there at 63rd, there were 5 men there to greet her, which was foolish, because it frightened her. With my Tim and the son-in-laws and, everybody. When she saw the 5, she fell to the ground. She knew that Mary was dead. So she took it really hard because Mary was her oldest, and she went through such a lot of poverty with my mother that they were very close together. So my mother took it very hard. Mm-hmm. But that was the end of our picnic at the Riverview Park. So,
what about raising your family during the Depression? Can you talk a little bit about that?
I tell you, during the Depression, they talk about a depression these days. It was nothing like our depression of 32 or 29, whenever it was. Dad was out of work for 3 years, and we had just bought this home, which in those days was a lot of money. It was $13,000. That was a lot of money those days. And, well, we were having a hard time trying to pay for it. But you got a little help from the government. They used to give you big sacks of flour and spaghetti and macaroni and things like that, which you wouldn't starve to death, but you wouldn't enjoy it too much, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So we got along pretty good until I guess things were getting worse, and I decided to bake bread to help things out. Of course, I had my mother with me, and I had, I guess, about 6 children then. Joe was, well, anyhow, I used to get up at 2 in the morning to go down and put the bread to raise, and my mother get up about 6 or 7. And between us, we baked an awful lot of bread, and we sold it very nicely. Francis gave us an old car, and he would take the bread out every morning, and he always got rid of it.
Who would take the bread out?
Huh?
Who would take the bread out?
Dad.
Dad, yeah, Grandpa?
Then he'd come back, and we always had another big batch of bread to go out, and he would bring home nice little bit of money, He never went hungry. He always had plenty to eat. And then Ann started baking pies. And she never told Jack, because Jack wasn't interested in anything outside of himself, And so one morning she said the whole back porch, the floor was loaded with pies. And he hadn't even heard about the pies or the bakery or anything. And she said, he came out and he looked at the pies and he says, what the hell? Couldn't believe all the pies on the floor. So then, of course, she told him. And then Dad would go and get the pies. And he had no trouble selling the pies either. Then finally he got the eggs. He used to get eggs by the big what do we call it?
Crate?
Crates, yeah. And then Joe used to go out with them and help him sell eggs. And he said Joe made much better than he did. Joe could sell them easy. He used to go over east where people had more money, to sell the bread and the eggs. And then Annie got real ambitious. She was an instigator in a lot of things. And she said, why don't you bake beans? Well,
Mamaw's beans?
Huh?
Mamaw's beans? Are these Mamaw's beans?
Mamaw's beans, yeah. And I said, okay. So then I started to bake beans along with the bread. And, well, that kept along for a couple of years, and I was getting pretty tired. Getting up at 2 in the morning. So I remember one Saturday morning, he left with 30 coffee cakes about 10 o'clock in the morning. He sold them all, and then he came back and he said, well, I'm ready for more. And I said, well, why do you think I'm going to get more coffee cakes ready by this time? And I was so exhausted, I started to cry. It wasn't his fault. I couldn't help it, I guess. He said, okay, this is the end of the bakery business. You'll do no more baking. So that ended the bakery business. But it helped us, though, for a couple of years. So then I came to Petzel to live, and Bill sure liked the homemade bread. And of course, I could still bake good bread. We never made a bad batch. My mother and I. The bread always turned out good. But I decided here I needed a new mix master and everything classy. To suit myself, I couldn't make a loaf of bread to suit myself, and I stopped baking here. That was Bill. He was half mad at me because he sure loved his bread. But I don't know whether, I guess I was losing the strength in my arms or something. I couldn't bake bread to suit myself. Well, of course, I was getting old by that time too. I guess I was getting tired. So that was the end of our bakery business. But anyhow, we moved from that house where we did all the baking and moved to out south here, 60th and near Central Park, to a big house that hadn't been rented for years, which was just what I wanted with my big family. But it was in pretty bad shape and hard to heat, but it was some of the happiest years of our lives we spent there. And also then when we moved from there to 60th Street. So that's practically the story of my life, I think. So, is that enough?
No. What about, you want a sip of soda?
No.
Okay. What about some incidents with your children? What about some things that happen with your children? Have any stories about your kids?
Well, there's just one story I could tell about Bill and Mariana.
Okay.
And that'll be short and sweet. That was that he was a very persistent suitor. He never took no for an answer. He's just the same today as he was years ago. When he went after something, he got it. So he and Mariana had a nice courtship, and they had a beautiful wedding, I would say. And my 3 girls, they all got married at 19. Patsy was almost 20 when she got married. So their courtships weren't very long. They got married young, all of them. And the only boy that married was Delno, and he was only 19. And we couldn't believe it when he wanted to get married so young. And the funny thing about his marriage was he was so crazy about Marion, and he had to go to war, or not war, I don't know, well, into the Navy. And while he was in the Navy, he sent me $30 and he said, buy Marion a diamond ring. He didn't want to lose her. He was afraid he was going to lose her. So I looked at the $30 and wondered how I was going to buy a diamond ring for $30. So anyhow, I think I looked in the newspaper. I was looking to see if I could find a bargain someplace. So I did find or heard of someplace. And, well, a couple of us went over there one night to see the diamond. And of course, I had to put a whole lot more with the $30 and bought her a very nice diamond. And then one night, we set the stage for Neil to give it to her.
Neil gave Marion the diamond?
So Neil gave Marion her diamond. They always had something in common after that. So she was very well satisfied with the ring, and so was Bill. So
does she still have the same ring?
Oh, sure. That's right. So, what else? Well, Patsy. Patsy met her husband at a roller rink. And he lived in Indiana. And he used to come in. She said, well, she went skating nearly every night. She loved to skate. And she said this fellow would come in, and he'd never skate, but he would just stand by the skaters, by the fence or whatever it was, and watch her. And she said he came so often, and I got to know him just from looking at him. She said I went over to him one night, and I said, why don't you skate? So I guess he said he didn't know how or something. So that's how they became acquainted. So 3 months after that, she got married. Because he lived in Indiana and he wasn't running back and forth, you know, very often. So she had a real short engagement and a real short married life because, as you know, he became sick and he has since passed away. So now she's a widow, and well, he suffered so much that I guess she felt relieved when the good Lord took him. He suffered terribly. So she's happy with her family in Omaha. And
do you have any recollections of when you were growing up?
Well, the only real recollection I had was that we never had a Santa Claus. My mother was trying her hardest to raise the 3 girls and Tim. So anyhow, I never knew what it was to really have a Christmas or a tree or anything like that. I never missed it because I didn't know any better, you know. We're all happy. We had enough to eat, that's about all. I remember one night of Christmas Eve, my bedroom door opened and someone put a sled into my room. And that was the only Christmas gift that I ever remember, was this sled. And I took it to bed with me, and nobody will ever know how happy I was. How you appreciate something when you when you don't have much, and you get something. So, well, there's not much to tell of my childhood because it was a very skippy childhood, you know. Few friends in the neighborhood. My mother did manage, though, to give me piano lessons. She said she was bound she was going to have one child that could play the piano. She loved music and singing. So, that was when we lived like at 36th and Halsted. Well, I was in 3rd grade then when we moved from there out south to the home where I met Dad. And then I went to school at Visitation. And after I finished 7th grade, my mother said to me, "What do you want to do now? Go back to school or go to work?" So after 7th grade, I said, "Well, I want to go to work." So I went to work at 14 and to the telephone company and told the big fib, of course, that I was 16. And in those days, they didn't care how old you were. So I worked for the telephone company then for 12 years and always loved it. Even after I was married, I didn't say anything to my mother one day. And I left her home with 2 babies and I went downtown and I got a job again with the telephone company.
What did you do for the telephone company? What did you do for the telephone company?
Switchboard. Well, I was a supervisor, you know. But of course, when I went back, they didn't make me a supervisor. Because I just worked for a few months, naturally. So then again, I went back right out here at, you know, St. Rita's School?
Mm-hmm.
There was a telephone company. It's still there.
That's right, yeah.
Well, my sister Mary was married then, and she and Pete were living with us. And I just had Mariana. Oh, and how she loved Mariana. So I went there one day and started to work again. I wouldn't even tell anybody that I was going to go to work. Of course, they didn't care. Mary was home to take care of the house. My mother was there. And every day, Pete had a big truck. He was a wholesale meat man. And they used to bring Mariana over when I would quit work about 4:30. All prettied up and to meet me. We'd all get in the big truck and come home. So those days didn't last long. It was shortly after that then that Mary died. So, talking about funny little things, if I could think of something humorous, I remember once about Joe. He was about 5 years old, I think, and he was naughty. I don't know what he did, but I was going after him anyhow. I was running for him. He ran in the bathroom, locked the door, and he says, "Aha, I threw the key in the toilet." So that did frighten me. I said, "Oh, Joe, roll up your sleeve of your shirt," and I said, "Put your hand in the toilet and pick out the key," which he did. And he let himself out of the bathroom, and was I relieved. And another time your mother was locked in the bathroom, and she was a little thing. Well then, I ran outside, and the first man that I met, the bathroom window was open, stranger on the street. I said, "Oh, mister, my little girl is locked in the bathroom. Will you take this ladder and put it up to the window and get her?" So of course he did, but he thought I was crazy, and he got her out of the bathroom. So those are little humorous things that happen, which many of them happen. But and then on 62nd Street, another prank they used to play, we used to have a barbecue quite frequently in the backyard
Mm-hmm.
and have on the ground. And when we cook our hot dogs and everything over the fire, and when the fire was dying out and there were just the embers, as you would call them, they would take Raymond, Joe, and Dell and swing them over the fire like this. And I tell you, we'd all laugh ourselves sick, which was nothing to laugh about, but I can still see them swinging him over the fire.
Would they be screaming and yelling or what?
Oh, did they enjoy that? Oh. So, I can't think of anything else, though.
What, would you do anything different? Looking back on your life,
well,
what would you do
there's one
different?
thing I did which was terrible. Annie and my mother and Jack went up to the country, and they took Mariana with them. And I guess I was expecting Constance then. And I missed them, you know. They were gone. They were going to be gone for the summer. So there was Tim at home and Daddy and myself. So one day I said, I think I'll go up to the country. So I packed my suitcase, and Emo, my dad's younger brother, he's about 16 years old, he came over, and I said, Emo, I'm going to Michigan. And I told him how to stoke the fire and everything, you know, for the 2-flat. And I don't think he had ever done it before. You know, he's a young kid. But anyhow, I packed my satchel and away I went. And I left a note for Daddy and told him that I had gone. And I told him what to put in Tim's lunch. You know, and he and Tim hardly talked to each other, and I don't know where my brains were, but anyhow, I went to Michigan, and when my mother and Annie saw me coming down the line, they said, what did you do? Well, I said, I just got lonesome, so I came after you. They said, well, you go home as fast as you can. And I said, well, I can't go home now, I have to stay all night. Well, they said, you can stay all night, but early in the morning you got to go home. So anyhow, they packed me off as early as they could in the morning. And I went home, and, you know, Dad never said a word to me. I guess maybe he was too mad that he never reproached me or anything. But when Ann come home, he went to her. And what he didn't tell her wasn't on the books. He blamed her for the whole thing. He said it was your fault that I did it.
Why did he blame Aunt Annie?
That was a terrible thing to do, though. You'd think I had no responsibility.
Yeah.
But I figured that 2 men could wait on themselves
Really?
for a night. They didn't appreciate it. Oh. Well, that's one of the foolish things I did in my life. Then, of course, I have the time of the baby. Do you want to hear about that?
Sure.
Well, I guess by this time everybody knows that I had one little girl, Constance Coletta, who was a little Mongolite. Well, that was heartbreaking at the time. I remember going to Anne mostly. She was more like a mother to me than my mother. She was so much older than me. I remember going to her home that night from the doctor's and telling her what I had learned, that the baby would never be able to go to school and what was wrong with it and everything. And I can remember the two of us. She had a big bedroom. We were in her bedroom, and we were walking around the bed and talking, walking in circles. And she said to me, "In 2 weeks' life, some rain must fall." I never forgot those words. So anyhow, in those days, you blame yourself when you had a child like that. People were very enlightened, you know. And I figured that it was my fault, or Dad's fault, that we had a child like that. And you never would tell anybody. Never told anybody. So, anyhow, she kept on growing, but not too nicely. She's very frail. But she got very sick. And she got so sick that, well, Dad would stay home from work, you know, there was no rest with her. And I knew that she was going to, well, we felt so terrible about the whole thing. So I said to my mother, I'm going to go to church, which I used to go every day anyhow, and spend an hour in front of the Blessed Eucharist at the Poor Clares. You remember the Poor Clares?
Mm-hmm.
Well, maybe you don't.
Poor Clares?
The Poor Clares. I used to have the Blessed Eucharist exposed all the time, day and night. I used to spend an hour there every morning. So I went over there that morning, and I said to the good Lord, either make her better or take her. And I prayed so hard. And when I came home, my mother said, the baby, no, she should call the doctor, the baby is dying. So we had no phone. I had to go and call the doctor. When I came back, she said, the baby is dying. And after asking the Lord to take her, I started to scream. She said, go to the, we was in the basement, to the back of the basement. She said, and don't come in here until you can compose yourself. So I came back and I just saw her draw her last breath. Her little nostrils dilated just a little bit and she was gone. And then how I thanked the Lord. And He was so good to me, because I was expecting Joseph any day, and she could have lived, and she was so much better off in heaven. So I thank Him to this day. And as Joe used to say, remember, Mom, we have a saint in heaven that you can pray to. So that was how my little baby died. And I remember calling up Dad, him coming home, and she was laid out in a little doll bassinet I had in the kitchen. She was real tiny. And he was looking down at her, and I can still see his tears falling on her. Even though we wanted her to go, we didn't want her to go, you know. And how he cried. So, and it was the end of little Constance Coletta. Well, she's in heaven, thank the Lord. So if the Lord sent me a few trials, He sent me an awful lot of happiness. I raised 7 children, that each one was better than the other. So I was real happy. And thank Him to this day for all His goodness and kindness to us. We all have good luck as far as I can see, you know, the whole family, we all have good health. course, it was a shock when we heard that Dad had cancer. But he didn't suffer like most people with cancer, thank the Lord. He was home quite a bit. And he was always smiling, you know, when he was in bed and sick. He was never hard to take care of. In fact, I had to do something to his side here, put medicine or something, and he'd say, "Give me that, I can do better than you." He told himself. Oh. But I always used to think, when he was dead, especially, when he worked at the streetcar company. You remember the streetcar company on Rockwell and Archer? They had where the cars would go in the barns. Well, when the cars would come in winter, they were all ice and snow underneath. Well, that's what he used to do. He used to be under there. They wouldn't close the doors in below zero weather. And he used to work on them, you know, with all the ice and the snow. And when he was dead, I just looked at those hands and thought how hard he worked for his family. You know, that was hard work. And he had big, strong, good-looking hands. So he never had more than a nickel in his pocket for Bull Durham. That's all he wanted, was that nickel for Bull Durham. He didn't have to pay car fare, but he wanted that nickel every day. So I say, if anybody is in heaven, he should be there.
Yeah, I
but he
remember
didn't
him.
mind working. You know, he never grew old. He looked the same when he grew old as when he was younger, because he was vital. He was full of life. He was a hard worker. So,
like you.
well, I wouldn't say I was a hard worker.
Oh.
I would think.
I think so, Mawaw.
No, I can truthfully say about myself, I never killed myself working. No. I did what I had to do, but I don't think I overworked myself. In fact, all I can remember about my life when I got married was living at the kitchen stove. And it seemed like I was always cooking and washing and nothing else. Oh dear. But anyhow, we had a happy life with the kids. You know, I used to play the piano at night, and some of them, in fact nearly all of them, had an instrument that they played. And we would have musical evenings, which were really lovely when I think back. There was no TV. And always one of the children was building a house made of blankets or something. Claire always had a gypsy tent telling fortunes, you know. And there's a little girl across the street. She always wanted her to get into the tent. She used to scare the living daylights out of her, telling her fortune. So we had good times there. But I always liked, and Patsy, you know, I don't know whether you ever knew that your mother had a beautiful voice.
No.
She was told, I was told, by the nuns at St. Nicholas, and then when she went to Aquinas, they said, if you want to make money, have your daughter's voice cultivated. We had no money. And another thing, Mariana never sang a song through in her life. She had no interest in singing. And maybe if she had, you know, we'd have stretched a point and see what we could have done with her voice. And Patsy had no voice at all, and she never stopped singing. And she and I would practice, you know, at night. She would sing. She wanted to sing over radio. In fact, she did. One night I brought her down to that opera down, and she sang. And Joe liked to sing, and I brought him down one night too to sing. He sang some Irish song. Did your mother come from Ireland? He had a nice voice. And I said to him, now Joe, well, sing out loud, Joe, so that we can hear you. Of course, the folks at home, we all had our ears strained to the radio to listen to him. And he sang out loud, he sang good. And you know, the girl who won the first prize, you couldn't hear her. She sang right into the thing, which we didn't know was the right thing to do, you know. And she got the first prize, which was $75. But anyhow, I used to bring the kids around like that, and they used to like that. But your mother had no interest in singing. Did you ever hear her sing much?
Never.
No. No, Annie never stopped singing. She was always singing, my sister Annie. Mm-hmm. That's where I have learned a lot of my tunes that I know today, that I learned from Ann. Ann was always singing.
Mawaw, where did the whole Christmas with Santa Claus coming on Christmas Eve, where did that start?
Well, maybe when Mariana was old enough to know, you know, it started early, but I can't just remember the first one. But, oh yes, we had Santa Claus, because my sister Mary, now I remember, was Santa Claus, and she made such a good one. And I always had good Christmases for my children. And we always stretched a point at Christmas, whether we had the wherewithal or not, you know. So I think they all enjoyed their Christmases. And Ann, of course, she always helped. She had a friend one year who gave us so many toys for the children. It was just fabulous. But my children all had good Christmases, but I can't remember anything. Only one year, 62nd Street, which the kids remember today, is because I made Neil on beans. You know, Patsy got a beautiful little set of red glass dishes, and Neil broke them all. So I made him sit on beams on the stairs there. They're going upstairs. Well, to this day, they say how cruel I was, you know. When the children were small, I used to make them sit on beams, and I used to beat them, you know, and things like that. Which I did used to beat them, you know. I go to Ann's at night, and when I come home, they'd say, well, someone did this, and someone did that, and I'd take off my slipper, and I would beat them through the blankets. I never hurt them, you know. So they all remember those beatings through the blankets. But one night, I was real angry at Delno for what he did. Now I don't remember what he did. I wasn't there. So I made him get up and scrub the kitchen floor at 11 o'clock. So I really meant business when they were small. I really toed the mark. I wasn't cruel, but I think my mother, she was stern. And my mother was sort of a domineering woman, you know. I remember her running after Ann and friends with a big stick of wood. she was mad at something they did. She, and another thing, what my mother did, I talked back to her once in my whole life. And she beat me so hard on my back that my nose bled. Well, my sister Mary was so mad at her that I don't know what all she didn't tell my mother. But well, then I remember that night my mother had taken me out and she bought me a lunch bag, you know, and all this kind of stuff. But my mother had a temper. You didn't talk back to my mother. And my children, I didn't allow them to talk back to me either, but I would never beat them, you know, like that. But there was never any, Daddy never would have stood for that. They talked back. So, I wouldn't say they were angels, but in that respect they were very good. So, I don't think I've left out anything. Only my happy days here. I'm very happy in my present home, and I live with the grandest people that were ever born. Bill is like my own son. He has never said an unkind word to me. Well, I haven't to him. And we get along fabulously. And I have a wonderful daughter in Mariana. I wouldn't want a better daughter. And Raymond, he does my walking for me. And so they're all good. So are all my grandsons. I love you and Billy and your sisters. I love you all. I love the... Now, I don't know Billy's children too well. I wish I knew them better, you know. And Danielle, but I know them and love them.
Well, they all love you.
Well, I hope they do. Like, love, love, love. There's a priest on TV, his name is Reverend John Powell, and all he speaks of is love. And love is such a powerful thing, which I'm beginning to even appreciate it the older I get, you know. That white people can't love, really, love, love, love. And the way the world, the condition that it's in today, why the people can't see what they're doing to one another, killing one another. Well, you were the one that was against the war in the family that I know of that fought against it. I sure give you credit for that.
Thank you.
So,
well, any last things you want to say, Mama?
no, there's nothing more, only that I want to say God bless all my loved ones, and I love you all so much.
Okay.
I remember you all in my prayers. Goodbye.